Hey guys, how's it going? Mies here, back with another Epic 7 video, and today we are adding another video into the RTA drafting guide series. And we are talking about this girl on the screen, Fairytale Tenebria. But before we jump into things, be sure to, as always, hit the sub button if you haven't already, ring the bell for notifications to see when my videos go up, and I also stream on Twitch on weekends, so be sure to give me a follow there so you can catch when I go live. But heading into things, Fairytale Tenebria, she is a very, very strong unit and has been very strong for quite a while. With kind of some new additions and changes, which we'll go over in a little bit, she's gotten a little bit weaker, but she's still a very, very good pick, because she does quite a few things. A full team AoE debuff that redirects provokes and makes them unbuffable, and also strips a buff, which is extremely powerful. But then also, when somebody's provoked or redirect provoked and they hit a unit on your team, she does her S2 wild card, which inflicts a random debuff, and there's only 3 random debuffs: silence, decreased defense, unhealable, and as a result you get death break very often, and that just increases the damage of your team overall by so much. That's really kind of why she's so powerful. She controls, amplifies the damage of your team, and also strips buffs. She's just a very annoying unit. And if you put Abyssal Crown on her, she also stuns. I'd say the interesting thing about Fairytale Tenebria is the fact that she kind of has a lot of different builds. You can go the very, very fast build where you try to take turn 1. The build that I have my Tenebria on is more of a bruiser build. High survivability, as a result, lacking a little bit of speed and not super high effectiveness. Her role really is to stay in the battle, hitting her S3s multiple times, and most importantly, doing her S2 multiple times, combined with other units like FCC that provoke as well. The other build that I've seen is the effect resist Tenebria, where you go high effect resist, so you're not disabled by the speed contesters in the game, so that you can still get out your S3. And the most common build, I say, is probably the fast, but not like turn 1 fast Tenebria, that really focuses on effectiveness. So having 200 plus, 220, 230 plus effectiveness on her, and you can even put a curse compass on her to increase her effectiveness even more on that first turn. So I'd say that's probably the most common Tenebria build, and that's going to be the one that I'm going to be focusing on this video. So let's take a look at how to pick against Tenebria. So here again, we have the tier list, not really a tier list per se, but really taking a look at the units that I feel are the best against Fairytale Tenebria in the meta. And again, I want to emphasize that these aren't the end all be all picks against Fairytale Tenebria. It's not like these are the only units that you can use to go against her and that are good against her, but these are just the units that are in the meta and units that you should be thinking about when you see a Fairytale Tenebria on the other team. And also, you have to take account into their other picks, your own strategy, your own unit builds, etc. All of these are going to be based off of what I feel are the most common builds and the most common way people build their teams as well. So take that with a grain of salt. It's definitely just a guideline for how you should be picking or thinking about what you should be picking when you see Fairytale Tenebria being picked on the other side. So the first one on the list is Holiday F.Tene. She, and along with a couple other units on this list, really got pushed up to an area where I feel like they could be good counters or good picks against Fairytale Tenebria because of the recent guild artifact. And the reason why that guild artifact makes things so much better against Fairytale Tenebria is because F.Tene only strips 1 buff. As a result, if you have a barrier, it strips that first before it strips your immunity. So when you have immunity, you don't get affected by her debuffs. So with Holiday F.Tene, if you build her with the Guide to Decision and immunity, she'll never get disabled by Fairytale Tenebria, at least solo. As a result, you'll be able to get pushed up in CR, and you'll be able to use your S3 to cleanse those debuffs that were hit on your allies, because Holiday F.Tene cleanses 2 debuffs. Now FCC, she was the premium counter to Fairytale Tenebria back before Guide to Decision, because she does the same thing as Guide Decision. She provides your team with a barrier, and she gives it to everyone too. So if all your units have immunity and you have FCC on your team, that basically means that Fairytale Tenebria is not debuffing your units turn 1, because all of them are still going to have immunity, and Fairytale Tenebria is not going to be able to do anything against that. There's a little caveat again, if you have units that don't have immunity, for example, she's going to be less good, right? Because it's going to strip that barrier, of course, but there's no immunity to be blocking the buffs, so you're not going to be protecting those units from her debuff. And the other unit on the very good list, or the last unit rather, is Violet. And that's just because Violet just stomps on any water unit. He won't be able to get hit, he'll counter, do a lot of damage to F.Tene, and kill her pretty quickly. On the good side of things, I'd say these are the kind of tier 2 picks against F.Tene. These are the conditional picks. The reason why they're conditional is because they don't always work, in my opinion. So first on the list, Designer Lilibet. If you get S3'd by Fairytale Tenebria, it takes 2 turns for her to use her Stitching, her S2 effect, to cleanse and push her up. So she could get S3'd, and then a unit could go, and Fairytale Tenebria could use her S2, and it just makes things a little bit more difficult. As a result, she's only just in the good and not in the really good category. You could still be in risk of getting Fairytale Tenebria, especially if, let's say, they have the unit going before Fairytale Tenebria, adding debuffs onto you. She'll get pushed up before the F.Tene, and then you have to either choose, should I use it now or wait later, and risk having your team getting blown up in the meantime. Now for these next couple units, the Soul Weavers and also for Lilius, it really depends on how much effect resist you have, and that's always a gamble. Maybe they're again, super high effectiveness Fairytale Tenebria, and you don't know how much effectiveness they have. So if you don't have enough effect resist to prevent her from disabling these units, then they can't cleanse because they will be debuffed. But if you're really confident in your effect resist, then you could bring these units in and they will be able to use their cleanse and get rid of all the debuffs. That's why they're only in the good category. Of course, with these, they could get bumped up to the really good category if you use, again, a Guide to a Decision. Because if you have immunity and a barrier, they will, again, not be stripped the immunity. That way, you can keep your units without debuffs, and then you can use your cleanse to cleanse the rest of your team. And Ray also has the advantage of being a green unit. So he has a 50% chance of getting missed by the Fairytale Tenebria, so that's another layer of protection. But again, it really depends on your effect resist for these units. For Ray, DJ Bazaar, Maid Chloe, Amelia, Lilius, and Acades. Now, the last one on this good list, Rowana. The reason why I put her on a good list is because whenever F.Tene does her S2, it counts as a counterattack. So as a result, she'll be healing and pushing your team up every time she does that. It's a really good deterrent for damage. It mitigates damage by healing, but also makes it so that it's troublesome for them to be able to kill any units, right? Because as long as that Fairytale Tenebria is on the field, it's a detriment to them. But the reason why I'm not putting her as a really good is because F.Tene always has that unhealable debuff that she can put on you. And if you get hit by that, then your units aren't getting healed anymore. So it's only a deterrent. It's not a guaranteed, oh, you pick her and she will just get crushed or invalidated. She's just good. She can be a counter. Now, the bottom meh tiers. The reason I have them in meh is because a lot of these are speed contesters. Solitaria, Bazaar, Cerise, Acid, Acoli, Pavel, Kisei. These are all speed contesters. You want them to go before the F.Tene. Again, that's because most F.Tenes, I'd say, aren't built super fast. They're probably around 270 or so, 270, 280, anywhere between there. And these speed contesters might oftentimes be faster than that. I'd say Bazaar maybe on the slower end of things, and also Kisei can also be built on the slower end of things. But Solitaria, Cerise, Acid, Acoli, and Pavel, you're usually building them around 290, 300 plus. Cerise, I'd say, is probably lower on this list as well because you really need the Fairytale Tenebria not to have immunity, which sometimes people build, right? my Fairytale Tenebria has immunity, so she doesn't get hit by Cerise. Or maybe they have high effect resist, then she doesn't get disabled by Cerise's S2. That's why she's in the mech category, because it doesn't always work out in every situation. But if you have these units, Solitaria, Acid, Acoli, Pavel, that are faster than the Fairytale Tenebria, then you can beat her out. But of course, that requires a lot of gear and making sure that you are faster, because if you're not, then you just get beat. Same with Basar. These units over here, I put in the mech category because they're a little bit selfish. You can say Violet is kind of like that, but he also does really good against a lot of other units as well. That's why I put him up in the really good category. But these are a little bit more situational. ML Kawazu cleanses all the debuffs when you get hit by an AoE and pushes himself up, and then you could use your S3 to blow up the F.Tene, or you could choose to blow up another unit. Up to you. As a result, he's pretty good against any type of debuffing units like F.Tene. Champion Zerato, you can bounce back the debuffs, but of course that's only on you. That's not on any other units. That's only on the Champ Z. As a result, he's very selfish. He may be able to solo their team if it's really debuff heavy, but if it's not, if it's just F.Tene, then he can struggle. After bouncing back that first debuff, he doesn't really have any other debuffs to really bounce back unless they have other disabling units or debuffing units. Same with F. Maya. Very selfish. If she gets hit by debuffs, she cleanses one debuff at the end of every turn, right? So that's why she's good, because if they're in a debuff heavy lineup, then she could prevent herself from getting disabled, and she does a lot of damage as well and is very tanky. Against this debuff heavy team, they're usually not very high damage. As a result, she can really just go to town. But again, a very selfish unit. She's not going to help your team. And then SSB. So the reason why I have her here is because F.Tene does a lot of AoEs. S3 is an AoE, every time she S2s is an AoE. That's building up her stacks. I forget what they're called. Focus stacks, I think, to make sure that when you're getting hit by all those AoEs, you're always clapping back your S2, hitting their units, doing a lot of damage. And as a result, that's why I think she's a decent counter. Or not counter, but rather a decent pick against F.Tene, because you're doing a lot of damage to their team over time as a result of F.Tene being there. That's the list of units, and I guess I never really went over Kisei, but again, speed contester S3 into the F.Tene, you reset her so she can't do her S3. Simple as that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. As always, leave a thumbs up if you did, and let me know in the comment section down below who you want to see next and whether or not this is something you want to continue seeing in the future. Alright guys, I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.